For this assignment, myself, Andreas, and Kelsey Holton worked together to put together this PowerPoint, and then I'm going to be going through our slides and kind of explaining what we learned from the three chapters, and then just kind of our own understanding of what we perceive project-based learning as, and kind of how we think it works. So first, let's talk about teachers and project-based learning in general. So what we really found out is that teachers have to be comfortable with the uncomfortable, and as far as teaching based on projects goes, teachers aren't really, it's not something that's very familiar to teachers. A lot of teachers still teach the old-fashioned way, just straight direct instruction. Kind of taking notes, not having students really do anything. So what we really need to do is, as teachers, as educators, we're always trying to find a new way to teach and finding new ways that are going to improve how our students learn. So we have to, instead of being so apprehensive to the idea of this project-based learning, teachers need to be okay and open with letting it come into our classroom and seeing how it can affect our students, for the positive, and we should never, as teachers, we should never be resistant to something that could only help our students. And me and Kelsey both found that we think project-based learning is a really good idea that all teachers should be using in their classroom. So the basic of project-based learning is that it starts with driving questions and sustained inquiry. So we have to have questions that are relevant to our students and that makes them really want to interested in what they're doing, where they're engaged and they're trying to find a way to um, they're trying to get into the content. So it's important that rather than just telling our students what they need to know, we should try to facilitate the learning so that we're guiding them to those questions, and we're making them engaged by wondering why we're asking what they're doing, or why we're trying to get them to think this way. It's also really important that throughout the lesson that we're monitoring their progression. So we're constantly assessing them for their comprehension and making sure that they're understanding what's going on in class. Um, Another thing that was really experiences that we thought was really important was their student experience, aka PBL buzzword. So investigating, researching, responding, creating, designing, innovating, explaining, receiving feedback. All these different types of words are really important to the overall student experience of the project-based learning, and especially experience as a whole. So when we talk about the benefits of project-based learning, we have to think of the curriculum versus an add-on or an extra add of the unit. So a lot of the time, project-based learning um, sometimes doesn't necessarily stem from the curriculum. What we're trying to do is we're trying to engage our kids with real-world activities, and we're trying to make it so that they become disciplined to design the direction they want to take their project and how they want to do it. And students that work collaboratively to solve problems that matter to them and to real world audiences are only going to benefit more outside of the classroom. Okay, so in our first summary of chapter three, okay, it kind of talks about the three biggest bullet points that we took away were, what do we want our students to learn, how can we make that project meaningful to them, and how can we teach them through experience and encouragement. So exactly, what do we want our kids to learn? We want to get our students to participate in these project-based learning projects. Okay, but essentially we don't want to just give them a project that they're not gonna that's not gonna connect them with anything of the discipline. We want our projects to get to the core of what our discipline is about. So, for example, if you're teaching a Spanish class, as Kelsey, she's a Spanish teacher. Kelsey's gonna want to try to use different projects that really go into speaking the language and maybe connecting the students to some maybe culture of how the language got about. Um, we also want to make the project meaningful to them. We don't want our students to be bored while they're doing these projects. We want to make sure that they're able to be engaged and that what they're doing, they actually feel like they're learning about something that's meaningful to them and that they'll remember after high school. So we need to make sure we're sparking their curiosity and we're getting them enthused about what they're doing. If you could get a student excited about a certain project, then you've already done half the work, because then they're going to want to do the work, and they're going to be more committed to completing their project and learning. So another thing from chapter 3 that I found was really interesting was talking about a different how our students sometimes view themselves, and they can view themselves in two different ways. They could have a fixed mindset where they believe that they're either smart or they're not. You're born with it or you're not. Or if they have that growth mindset where effort plays a greater role than smarts and the ability of a person to learn, so that as long as they're willing to grow and they're willing to learn, that they're going to be able to achieve great things. And I think it's really evident in classrooms today. If you just look at students, a lot of them just think, I'm just not smart. I'm not going to be able to get this. It's not, school's not for me. Then you can tell those students who are actually trying to get something out of what they're learning and out of high school in general. So it's important that we want all our students to be in the growth mindset. We want them to realize that, hey, the more you try, the greater role it's going to have in the ability of you to learn. So moving on to chapter 4, okay, chapter 4 talked about selecting projects that are going to engage students that are creative and outside the box. So again, we've been saying this throughout our presentation, that when you're trying to select these projects, you want to make sure that they're not just it's not just going up there and reading a speech, or it's not going up there, or it's not just a PowerPoint presentation, but it's actually getting students that something that's creative. Like for example, maybe they have to perform a play, or they come up with their own ending to a play, and they have to, as far as English goes, and they have to kind of write their own scenes, and they have to incorporate actions and moving. So just getting them thinking outside the box when it comes to our projects. Some qualities of good projects are making sure students are always involved, so that it's not just one student doing the entire team or the entire thing or anything. Making sure that our content is relatable to their students, making sure that it's insightful and that they are learning something that they will use down the line, and that our projects aren't so strict and set. If a student comes to you and they have an idea, being open to letting them use that idea, as long as they're able to meet the standards and they're getting something out of the project, then I think we need to allow for our students to be creative. And then another thing was just utilizing technology correctly. So using technology in the right way, so that it's not just students aren't just creating a PowerPoint one slide type situation, but they're actually really using technology in a way that's going to benefit their overall project. So last, chapter 5, making assessment meaningful. So again, authenticity and personalization. Okay, who is designing our assessments? Are they meaningful? Are they relevant? A lot of the time, the assessments that we have, as far as tests and multiple choice tests, students can't identify with those. They just sit there and they just feel like they're just filling in, and that's not ever going to be good for our students. We want to make sure that the assessments that we're having are personal to them, and that they really feel like they're connecting and they're doing something that is actually going to make a difference for their own education. So it's up to teachers, students, parents, and community members to be involved in the way that we assess our students, because it shouldn't just be the people who are making the test that determine how our students are assessed. Assessment for learning. So throughout and continuous, help drive the lesson, formative assessments, and just overall making our assessments for their learning. So it's not just that they're learning, or it's not that they're just trying to learn what's in the class, but they're trying to connect it to real life. Okay. And another assessment of learning could be at the conclusion of a lesson, evaluating and reflecting the project, getting them so that they're thinking back on what they did and how it's going to affect them, and overall how that project could help them in real life. And then assessment strategies, using rubrics, okay, so that students understand what the teacher's expectations are. They understand the criteria of the project, and just so the teacher is able to offer useful feedback to evaluate their performance. If the students have no idea why they're getting graded or how they're getting graded, then that's not fair to them as students, because they're not going to be able to understand why they did something wrong, or what the point even of being graded for this was. What kind of expectation are they trying to meet? What is the goal of them learning this? So it's important that we use rubrics to kind of assess their strategies. So yeah, thank you for listening to our presentation and for looking at our slides. And I hope you have a great rest of your day and year.